Going live. There I am live. Good afternoon. Welcome to Frankenstein Tea. This is a daily program from the Island Free Library. The Island Free Library is on Block Island. I am the director of that library. My name is Kristen. Welcome. Welcome to our library. This is the upper level of our library. I am sitting in a building that remains closed during summer 2020, during COVID. But we are open and functioning in new and creative ways. I just did a little post about that on our Instagram page and on our Facebook page. I was able to cross-post that little video that I did between Instagram and Facebook. That was an easy cross-post because they are owned by the same person, Zuckerberg there. I was unable to get that video up onto this YouTube channel. That remains a different conglomerate. That's a Google. I think it's a Google, right? It's a Google function, YouTube. So I'm not done giving up on that. I'm just stepping back and I'm just updating you that if you're a YouTube person with us, there's other information that I couldn't quite get to YouTube yet. That's on our Facebook and Instagram page. It's my update from today, this afternoon, Saturday, July 25th. So there's some good information out there about what we're doing. And of course, I continue to do this program, this afternoon check-in, this essence of reading aloud, of story, of the written word, about how much that means to us here at the library. And I think it means something as well to you, our listener, and our patrons, about how we can connect with everyone globally through written word. I had this little moment today at the library. We worked on our logo with Rosemary Kennelly over the last few years. And that was that was us. It did take a while. Probably didn't take years. I shouldn't say that, but it took a while because, we were picky. We don't quite like this one little line and this little thing, Anyway, she hung in there with us. She did a great job. And we have this new logo. And so now we're thinking about taglines. And our current tagline is Island Free Library, enriching Block Island life since 1875. And people like that. Right? Enriching Block Island life since 1875. We like that. We've always used that. That's what our tagline is. We like that. Today, I'm kind of moving that around a little in my head, thinking about enriching and educating, enlightening, trying to think of these words that can maybe expand what we do here. Maybe not. It's just a little thought I'm having today. We'll see where that thought goes. We are on Block Island, and it is gorgeous. If you are tuning in, I hope you've had a spectacular day out there, and maybe you're not tuning in yet because you just can't quite seem to, move yourself away from the outside, or maybe you've brought me outside with you. I don't know, but it is really spectacular, and I hope that people are enjoying it. I know that I just checked in with my mom, who's on Block Island right now, and she says it's hot for her. It's very hot for her. I did not find it hot today. So Mom, if you're listening, find a spot where you can feel the breeze, because it's pretty gorgeous. But I'm going to get her swimming after this, so she'll be okay. I'm going to read something today, and it's a little long, so I should get started. I don't always read something this long. I mean, it's not, hours. You're not going to be sitting here with me for hours, but it's a chunk of reading. And I didn't get to read through the whole thing because we were busy. We had outdoor library service today. And as I just explained, I did an update as a video update. So, we have things going on here, but I am here and I do have a story and I like it. And I'm confident that even without pre-reading it, I think I can get through it as a cold read. I don't like to do that. I like to pre-read at least once. Some things I read 2 or 3 times. Some things I read and then put aside and then reread and put aside, and come back to, so that it can really sit with me and I can get it right. But I think I can do this one slightly cold. I read some of it. Oh, shoot, that's my computer. Let me mute that before I go any further. Hang in there. Okay. And And I wasn't sure about this book. Okay, so let me start. So this is Stephen King. This is Stephen King that says The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. And it is stories. It is short stories. And so, I've been looking at this book all winter since we started this program, right? Stephen King, good storyteller, but he's scary for me. I find that Stephen King can get into my psyche. He can be scary for me. So that's I'm a little apprehensive about that, right? Having not read this story yet, having not pre-read that, will it get into my psyche? Will it get into yours? Is it going to be scary as I continue to read it? We don't know. But I found one that I thought we could try. And, right off the bat, I liked it. It will resonate with you, I'm sure. Anyone connected to Block Island here. It resonates with me. And then it had a little Florida thing that will resonate with many Block Islanders as well and resonates with me. And so we'll see what happens here as we read this Stephen King book. So let's do it. It's Justice. This is Stephen King, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, Stories. It was published by Scribner in 2015. I have a last sip of my iced coffee here. I'm going to take that sip. A good iced coffee today. Okay, here we go. Stephen King, The Dune. As the judge climbs into the kayak beneath a bright morning sky, a slow and clumsy process that takes him almost 5 minutes, he reflects that an old man's body is nothing but a sack in which he carries aches and indignities. 80 years ago, when he was 10, he jumped into a wooden canoe and cast off, with no bulky life jacket, no worries, and certainly with no pee dribbling into his underwear. Every trip to the little unnamed island, lying like a half-submerged submarine 200 yards out in the Gulf, began with a great and uneasy excitement. Now there is only unease. A pain that seems centered deep in his guts and radiates to everywhere. But he still makes the trip. Many things have lost their allure in these shadowy later years. Most things, but not the dune on the far side of the island. Never the dune. In the early days of his exploration, he expected it to be gone after every big storm. And following the 1944 hurricane that sank the USS Warrington off Vero Beach, he was sure it would be. But when the skies cleared, the island was still there. So was the dune, although the 100-mile-an-hour winds should have blown all the sand away, leaving only the bare rocks and knobs of coral. Over the years, he has debated back and forth about whether the magic is in him or in the island. Perhaps it's both, but surely most of it is in the dune. Since 1932, he has crossed this short stretch of water thousands of times. Usually he finds nothing but rocks and bushes and sand, but every now and then there is something else. Settled in the kayak at last, he paddles slowly from the beach to the island, his frizz of white hair blowing around his mostly bald skull. A few turkey buzzards wheel overhead, making their ugly conversation. Once he was the son of the richest man on the Florida Gulf Coast. Then he was a lawyer. Then he was a judge on the Pinellas County Circuit. Then he was appointed to the state Supreme Court. There was talk during the Reagan years of a nomination to the United States Supreme Court, but that never happened. And a week after the idiot Clinton became president, Judge Harvey Beecher, just the judge to his many acquaintances, he has no real friends, in Sarasota, Osprey, Nokomis, and Venice, retired. Hell, he never liked Tallahassee anyway. It's cold up there. Also, it's too far from the island and its peculiar dune. On these early morning kayak trips, paddling the short distance on smooth water, he's willing to admit that he's addicted to it. But who wouldn't be addicted to a thing like this? On the rocky east side, a gnarled bush juts from the split in a guano-splattered rock. This is where he ties up, and he's always careful to tie well. It wouldn't do to be stranded out here. His father's estate, that's how he still thinks of it, although the elder Beecher has been gone for 40 years now, covers almost 2 miles of prime Gulf front property. The main house is far inland on the Sarasota Bay side, and there would be no one to hear him yelling. Tommy Curtis, the caretaker, might notice him gone and come looking. More likely, he would just assume the judge was locked up in his study, where he often spends whole days, supposedly working on his memoirs. Once upon a time, Mrs. Riley might have gotten nervous when he didn't come out of the study for lunch, but now he hardly ever eats at noon. She calls him nothing but a stuffed string, although not to his face. There's no other staff, and both Curtis and Mrs. Riley know he can be cross when he's interrupted. Not that there's really much to interrupt. He hasn't added so much as a line to the memoirs in 2 years, and in his heart he knows they will never be finished. The unfinished recollections of a Florida judge. No tragedy there. The one story he could write is the one he never will. He's even slower getting out of the kayak than he is getting in, and turns turtle once, wetting his shirt and pants in the little waves that run up the gravelly shingle. Beecher is not discommoded. It isn't the first time he's fallen, and there's no one to see him. He supposes he's mad to continue these trips at his age, even though the island is so close to the mainland. But stopping them isn't an option. An addict is an addict is an addict. Beecher struggles to his feet and clutches his belly until the last of the pain subsides. He brushes sand and small shells from his pants, double-checks his mooring rope, then spots one of the turkey buzzards perched on the island's largest rock, peering down at him. "Yee!" he shouts at the voice he now hates, cracked and wavering, the voice of an old shrew in a black dress. "Yee, yee, you bugger! Get on about your business." After giving a brief rustle of its raggedy wings, the turkey buzzard sits right where it is. Its beady eyes seem to say, "But Judge, today, you're my business." Beecher stoops, picks up a larger shell, and shies it at the bird. This time, it does fly away, the sound of its wings like rippling cloth. It soars across the short stretch of water and lands on his dock. Still, the judge thinks, a bad omen. He remembers Jimmy Caslow of the Florida State Patrol telling him once that turkey buzzards didn't just know where carrion was, but where carrion would be. "I can't tell you," Caslow said, "how many times I've seen those ugly bastards circling a spot on the Tamamami where there's a fatal wreck a day or two later." Sounds crazy, I know, but just about any Florida road cop will tell you the same. There are almost always turkey buzzards out here on the little no-name island. Judge Beecher supposes it smells like death to them, and why not? He sets off on the little path he has beaten over the years. He will check the dune on the other side where the sand is beach fine instead of stony and shelly, and then he will return to the kayak and drink his little jug of cold tea. He may doze a while in the morning sun. He dozes often these days, supposes most non-generians do. And when he wakes, if he wakes, he'll make the return trip. He tells himself that the dune will be just a smooth, blank upslope of sand, as it is most days, but he knows better. Goddamn buzzard knew better, too. He spends a long time on the sandy side with his age-warped fingers clasped in a knot behind him. His back aches, his shoulders ache, his hips ache, his knees ache. Most of all, his gut aches. But he pays these things no mind, perhaps later, but not now. He looks at the dune and at what is written there. Anthony Wayland arrives at Beecher's Pelican Point Estate bang on 7:00 p.m., just as promised. One thing the judge has always appreciated, both in the courtroom and out of it, is punctuality, and the boy is punctual. Judge Beecher reminds himself never to call Wayland boy to his face, although this being the South, son is okay. Wayland wouldn't understand that. When you're 90, any fellow under the age of 60 looks like a boy. Thanks for coming, the judge says, ushering Wayland into his study. It's just the two of them. Curtis and Mrs. Riley have long since gone to their homes in Nokomis Village. You brought the necessary document? Yes, indeed, Judge. Wayland opens his big square attorney's briefcase and removes a thick document bound by a heavy clip. The pages aren't vellum, as they would have been in the old days, but they are rich and heavy just the same. At the top of the first, in heavy and forbidding type, what the judge has always thought of as graveyard type, are the words, Last Will and Testament of Harvey L. Beecher. You know, I'm kind of surprised you didn't draft this document yourself. You've probably forgotten more Florida probate law than I've ever learned. That might be true, the judge says in his driest tone. At my age, folks tend to forget a great deal. Wayland flushes to the roots of his hair. I didn't mean... I know what you mean, son, the judge says. No offense taken. But since you ask, you know that old saying about how a man who serves as his own lawyer has a fool for a client? Wayland grins. Heard it and used it plenty of times when I'm wearing my public defender hat and some sad sack wife abuser or hit and runner tells me he plans to go the DIY route in court. I'm sure you have, but here's the unabridged version. A lawyer who serves as his own lawyer has a great fool for a client. Goes for criminal, civil, and probate law. So, shall we get down to business? Time is short. This is something he means in more ways than one. They get down to business. Mrs. Riley has left decaf coffee, which Wayland rejects in favor of a Coca-Cola. He makes copious notes as the judge dictates the changes in his dry courtroom voice, adjusting old bequests and adding new ones. The major new one, $4 million, is to the Sarasota County Beach and Wildlife Preservation Society. In order to qualify, they must successfully petition the state legislature to have a certain island just off the coast of Pelican Point declared forever wild. They won't have a problem getting that done, the judge says. You can handle the legal for them yourself. I'd prefer pro bono, but of course, that's up to you. One trip to Tallahassee should do it. It's a little spit of a thing, nothing growing there but a few bushes. Governor Scott and his Tea Party cronies will be delighted. Why's that, Judge? Because the next time Beach and Preservation comes to them begging money, they can say, Did an old Judge Beecher just give you 4 million? Get out of here and don't let the door hit you in the ass on your way out. Waylon agrees that this is probably just how it will go, and the two men move on to the smaller bequests. Once I get a clean draft, we'll need 2 witnesses and a notary, Waylon says when they've finished. I'll get all that done with this draft here, just to be safe, the judge says. If anything happens to me in the interim, it should stand up. There's no one to contest it. I've outlived them all. A wise precaution, Judge. It would be good to take care of it tonight. I don't suppose your caretaker and housekeeper won't be back until 8 tomorrow, Beecher says, but I'll make it the first order of business. Harry Staines on Vamos Road's a notary, and he'll be glad to come over before he goes into his office. He owes me a favor, or 6. You give that document to me, son. I'll lock it in my safe. I ought to at least make a... Waylon looks at the gnarled, outstretched hand and trails off. When a state Supreme Court judge, even a retired one, holds out his hand, demurrals must cease. What the hell? It's only an annotated draft. Anyway, soon to be replaced by a clean version. He passes the unsigned will over and watches as Beecher rises, painfully, and swings a picture of the Florida Everglades out on a hidden hinge. The judge enters the correct combination, making no attempt to hide the touchpad from view, and deposits the will on top of what looks to Waylon like a large and untidy heap of cash. Yikes. There, Beecher says, all done and buttoned up. Except for the signing part, that is. How about a drink to celebrate? I have some fine single malt scotch. Well, I guess one wouldn't hurt. It never hurt me, although it does now, so you'll have to pardon me for not joining you. Decaf coffee and a little sweet tea are the strongest drinks I take these days. Stomach woes. Ice? Waylon holds up 2 fingers, and Beecher adds 2 cubes to the drink with the slow ceremony of old age. Waylon takes a sip, and color immediately dashes into his cheeks. It is the flush, Judge Beecher thinks, of a man who enjoys his tipple. As Waylon sets his glass down, he says, Do you mind if I ask what the hurry is? You're all right, I take it. Stomach woes aside. The judge doubts if young Waylon takes it that way at all. He's not blind. A country fair, he says, seesawing one hand in the air and sitting down with a grunt and a wince. Then after consideration, he says, Do you really want to know what the hurry is? Waylon considers the question, and Beecher likes him for that. Then he nods. It has to do with that island we took care of just now. Probably never even noticed it, have you? Can't say that I have. Most folks don't. It barely sticks up out of the water. The sea turtles don't even bother with that old island. Yet, it's special. Did you know my grandfather fought in the Spanish-American War? No, sir, I did not. Waylon speaks with exaggerated respect, and Beecher knows the boy believes his mind is wandering. The boy is wrong. Beecher's mind has never been clearer, and now that he's begun, he finds that he wants to tell this story at least once before. Well, before. Yes, there's a photograph of him standing on top of San Juan Hill. It's around here someplace. Grampy claimed to have fought in the Civil War as well, but my research, for my memoirs, you understand, proved conclusively that he could not have done. He would have been a toddler, if born at all. But he was quite the fanciful gentleman, and he had a way of making me believe the wildest tales. Why would I not? I was only a child. not long from believing in Kris Kringle and the tooth fairy. Was he a lawyer like you and your father? No, son, he was a thief. The original light finger Harry. Anything that wasn't nailed down. Only, like most thieves who don't get caught, our current governor might be a case in point. He called himself a businessman. His chief business and chief thievery was land. He bought bug and gator infested Florida acreage cheap and sold it dear to folks who must have been as gullible as I was as a child. Balzac, Balzac once said, "Behind every great fortune, there is a crime." That's certainly true of the Beecher family, and please remember that you're my lawyer. Anything I say to you must be held in confidence. Yes, Judge. Wayland takes another sip of his drink. It is by far the finest scotch he has ever drunk. Grampy Beecher was the one who pointed out that island to me. I was 10. He'd had the care of me for the day, and I suppose he wanted some peace and quiet. Or maybe what he wanted was a bit noisier. There was a pretty housemaid, and he may have been in hopes of investigating beneath her petticoats. So he told me that Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, had supposedly buried a great treasure out there. Nobody's ever found it, Havy, he said. Havy's what he called me. But you might be the one, a fortune in jewels and gold doubloons. You know what I did next, I suppose. I suppose you went out there and left your grandfather to cheer up the maid. The judge nods, smiling. I took the old wooden canoe we had tied up to the dock, went like my hair was on fire and my tail feathers were catching. Didn't take but 5 minutes to paddle out there. Takes me 3 times as long these days, and that's if the water's smooth. The island's all rock and brush on the landward side, but there's a dune of fine beach sand on the Gulf side. It never goes away. In the 80 years I've been going out there, it never seems to change. Didn't find any treasure, I suppose. I did, in a way, but it wasn't jewels and gold. It was a name written in the sand of that dune, as if with a stick. You know, only I didn't see any stick. The letters were drawn deep, and the sun struck shadows into them, making them stand out, almost as if they were floating. What was the name, Judge? I think you have to see it written to understand. The judge takes a sheet of paper from the top drawer of his desk, prints carefully, then turns the paper around so Wayland can read it. Robbie LaDouche. All right, Wayland says cautiously. On any other day, I would have gone treasure hunting with this very boy because he was my best friend. You know how boys are when they're best friends. Joined at the hip, Wayland says, smiling. Perhaps he's recalling his own best friend in bygone days. Tight as a new key in a new lock, Wayland agrees. But it was summer, and he'd gone off with his parents to visit his mama's people in Virginia or Maryland or some such northern clime. So I was on my own. But attend me closely, counselor. The boy's actual name was Robert de la Suite. Again, Wayland says, all right. The judge thinks that sort of leading drawl could become annoying over time, but it isn't a thing he'll ever have to actually find out, so he lets it go. He was my best friend, and I was his, but there was a whole gang of boys we ran around with, and everyone called him Robbie LaDouche. You follow? I guess, Wayland says, but the judge can see he doesn't. That's understandable. Beecher has had a lot more time to think about these things, often on sleepless nights. Remember that I was 10. If I had been asked to spell my friend's nickname, I would have done it just this way. He taps Robbie LeDouche, speaking almost to himself, and he adds, "Some of the magic comes from me. It must come from me. The question is, how much?" "You're saying you didn't write the name in the sand?" "No, I thought I made that clear." "One of your other friends, then?" "They were all from Nokomis village and didn't even know about that island. We never would have paddled out to such an uninteresting little rock on our own. Robbie knew it was there. He was also from the point, but he was hundreds of miles north." "All right." "My chum Robbie never came back from that vacation. We got word a week or so later that he'd taken a fall while out horseback riding. He broke his neck, killed instantly. His parents were heartbroken. So was I." There is silence while Wayland considers this, while they both consider it. Somewhere far off, a helicopter beats at the sky over the Gulf. The DEA looking for drug runners, the judge supposes. He hears them every night. It's the modern age, and in some ways, in many, he'll be glad to be shed of it. At last, Wayland says, "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "Well, I don't know," the judge says. "What do you think I'm saying?" But Anthony Wayland is a lawyer, and refusing to be drawn is an ingrained habit with him. "Did you tell your grandfather?" "On the day the telegram about Robbie came, he wasn't there to tell. He never stayed in one place for long. We didn't see him again for 6 months or more. No, I kept it to myself. And like Mary, after she gave birth to God's only son, I considered these things in my heart." "And what conclusion did you draw?" "I kept canoeing out to that island to look at that dune. That should answer your question. There was nothing, and nothing, and nothing. I guess I was on the verge of forgetting all about it, but then I went out one afternoon after school, and there was another name written in the sand. Printed in the sand, to be courtroom exact. No sign of a stick that time either, although I suppose a stick could have been thrown into the water. This time the name was Peter Alderson. It meant nothing to me until a few days later. It was my chore to go out to the end of the road and get the paper, and it was my habit to scan the front page while I walked back up the drive, which, as you know from driving it yourself, is a good quarter-mile long. In the summer, I'd also check on how the Washington Senators had done, because back then they were as close to a Southern team as we had. This particular day, a headline on the bottom of the front page caught my eye. Window washer killed in freak fall. The poor guy was doing the third-floor windows of the Sarasota Public Library when the scaffolding he was standing on gave way. His name was Peter Alderson. The judge can see from Wayland's face that he believes this is either a prank or some sort of elaborate fantasy the judge is spinning out. He can also see that Wayland is enjoying his drink, and when the judge moves to top it up, Wayland doesn't say no. And really, the young man's belief or disbelief is beside the point. It's just such a luxury to tell it. Maybe you see why I go back and forth in my mind about where the magic lies, Beecher says. I knew Robbie, and the misspelling of his name was my misspelling. But I didn't know this window washer from Adam. In any case, that's when the dune really started to get a hold on me. I began going out almost every day, a habit that's continued into my very old age. I respect the place. I fear the place. And most of all, I'm addicted to the place. Over the years, many names have appeared on that dune, and the people the names belong to always die. Sometimes it's within the week, sometimes it's 2, but it's never more than a month. Some have been people I knew, and if it's by nickname, I knew them. It's the nickname I see. One day in 1940, I paddled out there and saw Grampy Beecher drawn into the sand. He died in Key West 3 days later. It was a heart attack. With the air of someone humoring a man who is mentally unbalanced, but not actually dangerous, Waylon asks, "Did you never try to interfere with this process? Call your grandfather, for instance, and tell him to see a doctor." Beecher shakes his head. "I didn't know it was a heart attack until we got word from the Monroe County medical examiner, did I? It could have been an accident or even a murder. Certainly there were people who had reasons to hate my grandfather. His dealings were not of the purest sort." Still. Also, I was afraid. I still feel, as if there on that island, there's a hatch that comes ajar. On this side is what we're pleased to call the real world. On the other is all the machinery of the universe, running at top speed. Only a fool would stick his hand into such machinery in an attempt to stop it. Judge Beecher, if you want your paperwork to sail through probate, I'd keep quiet about all this. You might think there's no one to contest your will, but when large amounts of money are at stake, third and fourth cousins have a way of appearing like rabbits from a magician's hat. And you know the time-honored criterion, being of sound mind. I've kept it to myself for 80 years, Beecher says, and in his voice, Waylon can hear, objection overruled. Never a word until now, and perhaps I need to point it out again, although I shouldn't. Whatever I say to you falls under the umbrella of privilege. All right, Waylon says, fine. I was always excited on days when names appeared in the sand, unhealthily excited, I'm sure, but terrified of the phenomenon only once. That single time I was deeply terrified and fled back to the point in my canoe as if devils were after me. Shall I tell you? Please. Waylon lifts his drink and sips. Why not? Billable hours are, after all, billable hours. It was 1959. I was still on the point. I've always lived here except for the years in Tallahassee, and it's better not to speak of them. Although I now think part of the hate I felt for that provincial backwater of a town, perhaps even most of it, was simply a masked longing for the island and the dune. I kept wondering what I was missing, you see, who I was missing. Being able to read obituaries in advance gives a man an extraordinary sense of power. Perhaps you find that unlovely, but there it is. So, 1959. Harvey Beecher lawyering in Sarasota and living at Pelican Point. If it wasn't pouring down rain when I got home, I'd always change into old clothes and paddle out to the island for a look-see before supper. On this particular day, I'd been kept at the office late, and by the time I'd gotten out to the island, tied up, and walked over to the dune side, the sun was going down, big and red, as it so often does over the Gulf. What I saw stunned me. I literally could not move. There wasn't just one name written in the sand that evening, but many. And in that red sunset light, they looked as if they had been written in blood. They were crammed together. They wove in and out. They were written over and above and up and down. The whole length and breadth of the dune was covered with a tapestry of names. The ones down by the water had been half erased. I think I screamed. I can't remember for sure, but yes, I think so. What I do remember is breaking the paralysis and running away as fast as I could down the path to where my canoe was tied up. It seemed to take me forever to unpluck the knot, and when I did, I pushed the canoe out into the water before I climbed in. I was soaked from head to toe, and it's a wonder I didn't tump it over. Although in those days I could have easily swum to shore and pushing the canoe ahead of me. Not these days. If I tipped my kayak over now, that would be all she wrote. He grins. Speaking of writing, as we are. Then I suggest you stay on shore at least until your will is signed, witnessed, and notarized. Judge Beecher gives the young man a wintry smile. You needn't worry about that, son, he says. He looks toward the window and the gulf beyond. His face is long and thoughtful. Those names, I can see them yet, jostling each other for place on that blood-red dune. 2 days later, a TWA plane on its way to Miami crashed in the Glades. All 119 souls on board were killed. The passenger list was in the paper. I recognized some of the names. I recognized many of them. You saw this? You saw those names? Yes. For several months after that, I stayed away from the island, and I promised myself I would stay away for good. I suppose drug addicts make the same promises to themselves about their dope, don't they? And, like them, I eventually weakened and resumed my old habit. Now, counselor, do you understand why I called you out here to finish the work on my will and why it had to be tonight? Wayland doesn't believe a word of it, but like many fantasies, this one has its own internal logic. It's easy enough to follow. The judge is 90. His once ruddy complexion has gone the color of clay. His formerly firm step has become shuffling and tentative. He's clearly in pain, and he's lost weight he can't afford to lose. I suppose that today you saw your name in the sand, Wayland says. Judge Beecher looks momentarily startled, and then he smiles. It is a terrible smile, transforming his narrow, pallid face into a death's head grin. Oh no, he says, not mine. A little Stephen King for you on this Saturday afternoon in July. I hope you enjoyed. Maybe I won't avoid more Stephen King. Maybe I'll find something else. My dad just wrote creepy. He's always creepy. But I liked that. I liked that better than I thought I was going to like that. As you've heard me say before on this program, it's not always what I want to read, right? I try to diversify. I try to think of other people that are listening and what they might like to hear. And I try to find a good story, right? I just always want it to be good. I might have to read more Stephen King. We'll see. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Stay well, mask up, keep your distance, wash your hands, take good care of yourselves, think kind thoughts, eat something healthy, eat vegetables, find somebody who planted seeds this winter in their shelter-in-place experience and now have squash coming out of their ears. Find some squash and cook up some squash. Tomatoes aren't happening here on Block Island yet, but squash sure is. I'll see you tomorrow at 3:00 for another episode of Frankenstein Tea. Peace.